Oh, cool.
Yeah.
It says it's now streaming. I see it. That's kind of
Yeah.
cool. Are you? You have to record before you do that? Are you recording the Zoom and then it goes to that, or I don't know?
Yeah, it actually records it through through Vimeo as well. So so that we can then, you know, play back afterwards.
Right. Cool.
Okay. Just one more place to share it. Okay, so good morning. We have a little bit of a different time here this morning for the Born Again series. I'm here with Steve Wilkes. Steve is a member of our congregation at Monroe Valley. He and Krista are some of the coolest people you ever meet. Steve is a high octane individual. That's the way I like to think of him. He is not a low energy person. He's a high energy person. Yeah, he's actually fueling up. That's a little dangerous. Steve is one of those people that if you haven't met, you need to meet. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this is I want people to get to meet and know people that I just think are really wonderful Christians. And he is also, he would never say this to you, but if you look in just about any group, if you're in a group of people and Steve's there, he's probably the smartest guy in the room. And so that is, yeah, he's never going to agree with me on that, but it's true. And so Steve has a unique story. Everybody's story is unique, but his is a little different than some of the other ones that we have covered in that Steve was raised by Christian parents and very early on accepted the gospel, but then his story took a turn along the way. So I'm just gonna pass it to Steve and let him kind of tell some of that beginning and get us up to speed to what you know, probably the more important part of his story in the sense of what makes your story a little different. So Steve, just if you could just tell us, you know, what was your childhood like and when do you become a Christian and all those sorts of things?
Well, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Steve Wilkes, and it's an honor to be asked to talk about this, about my conversion, my story. It's really my whole life story. I like Scott said, I was raised by godly parents. They did everything they could to raise me in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. And I was the middle child. I have an older sister and a younger brother. And both my parents and my sister are still with us in the Lord's church. But currently my brother is not. And I'll talk about that some more because of it's similar to what I went through. We both were baptized pretty young. I was baptized when I was about 15, almost 16 years old, 15, 8 months. I was raised in Virginia. I moved there when I was 2. I was actually born in Texas near Galveston. My dad worked for NASA at the time. But they moved to Northern Virginia near Washington, D.C. when I was about 2. And so I spent most of my childhood in Virginia, all the way through college in Virginia, and was raised in a faithful congregation. Went to services twice on Sunday and Bible classes on Wednesday night, and very similar to what probably a lot of people do around the globe now. You know, I was exposed to scripture. You know, I'm like Timothy. My mom and my grandma taught me scriptures early on. You know, my whole family, so I was well versed in the gospel by the time I was 15 and decided to get baptized. I do believe that I understood the cost, and I understood what was going on, and I knew that I was a sinner and I needed Christ in my life. So when I was baptized, it was a very a joyful time for me and everybody in my family and my local congregation, and the church and the angels were rejoicing. And but as time went by, I graduated high school and I went to college, and I went to Virginia Tech. I didn't make it into Virginia Tech early. First, I only made it into Florida College, was the only college that accepted me. But I was encouraged by my mom to write a letter to the dean of the school, the school I was trying to get into, which was the Human Resources School at Virginia Tech. And I did, and I explained that my GPA was low because I had struggled early on, but it got better and better through the years. So my junior year and my senior year were almost all A's, whereas my sophomore and freshman year were lower grades. And my SAT score was high enough that they changed their mind and let me in on condition that I did good on my first year. I had to maintain a C+ average or something in my first year to stay at Virginia Tech. When I went to Virginia Tech, there wasn't a congregation in Blacksburg, Virginia, where the university was. There was, but it was a little bit outside of town, and it was more liberal than I was used to, in the sense that they did they did meals in the church. They did some things that were a little bit uncomfortable for me, the way I was raised in the church to believe. So I did attend with them some, but I think at the time I took the opportunity to explore other religions and other denominations. So I would attend with a Baptist friend to his Baptist church, or I'd attend with a friend to his Lutheran church, or I'd go to the Catholic church that Sunday and see what's going on, or the chapel at this university, whatever they had going on. Maybe they had an interdenominational one or something like that. And I kind of explored. And I don't recommend that when you first leave your parents and what you're used to and know. That can add a lot of confusion to a young Christian, to a mind that's not really matured much. It's still on the what we call the milk, the spiritual milk. It led me probably down the path. It started me down the path that I ended up going on. So at the summer of my freshman year in college, by the way, I did maintain the C+ average, and I stayed in Virginia Tech. But that summer, I was invited by a preacher that I grew up with, who, when I was younger, he was living in Vermont. But I used to see him and his kids at Florida College camp in the summer. I knew him from the summer camp, and he invited me to come out. He left Vermont and was actually living in Hong Kong, and taking 4 ways into China to preach the gospel in China. This is 1990. I graduated high school, so this is the summer of 91. And so it's real soon after Tiananmen Square and all that stuff we know about the history. So it's kind of a weird time in China, as far as very closed off to Christianity and religion in general, especially people coming in and kind of what they call indoctrinating their people. But I went around and I asked individuals if they would help support me, and people did donate some money to pay my way to go to do that for the summer for a couple of months, 3 months. And I went to stay with him first, and then we took a trip into Xinjiang, China, which is northern near Korea, and I stayed there for the majority of the time. And he came and went, and he brought other people, other preachers. I'm still friends with some of them on Facebook and stuff. I still know some of the people in China even. I'm not friends with any of them on Facebook, but I did make some friends there. Of course, this was before, obviously it's before Facebook, but it happened in China much like we do, like we've heard other people say, that you kind of go out. There's these things called English corners, where people go out and they want to practice their English, and you go out there and you talk English with them, and you try to drop seeds, and then you set up Bible studies with people on the side or privately, and try to keep it very hushed because of the situation with the government. We baptize people in bathtubs, in hotel rooms. That was the most common way to do it. we actually smuggled in Bibles that were side by side English to Chinese, so I could point at an English first and laterally across the page say, read this in Chinese, and so they could understand what I was saying from the Bible. And we gave those Bibles to people so they could not only have something that helps them with their English, but they'd have a Bible that they could read in Chinese or English. So it was a very, very amazing experience. But the thing is I'm young, I'm 18, 19 years old, and I'm trying to do what's right, but am I doing it for the right reasons? I got very lonely in China, especially when the preacher that brought me in left, and I was there by myself.
I was gonna say, so you were there. There were times when you were there, literally just you.
Yes.
Wow.
Staying in the hotel room. I had to rely on people who knew how to speak English, and they would only come around sometimes,
Okay.
I'd work with the hotel to help their chefs. I actually taught their chefs how to do a couple of American food items, so I wouldn't have to eat things that were weird to me all the time. I never was asked to eat anything too weird except for the head of a fish. That's kind of an honor thing. They want you to at least have the eyeball of the fish, but I taught them how to portion a chicken in an American way, where they just hack it. they just hack the chicken and get the meat off. We know drumsticks and breast and thigh, and that's how we do it. And I taught them how to portion a chicken. That was one thing. I also taught them how to make chili. They would do they would make chili for me and stuff like that. But yeah, there was times when I was in there alone, and actually we hooked me up with a job. I got a job at a local university. It was summer, so it was a summer session type of class where I taught colloquial English, spoken English, conversational English to people who were already taking a couple years of English as a foreign language, and so they wanted to get a little bit more versed in it. I didn't have to know any Chinese to do that. The whole class was in English. And I think I had a handful, maybe a dozen students, and I would bring in a theme every week, and we would talk about that and how people converse in America, and what's the American, how do we, what's the idiom, what's the, how do we speak about that kind of stuff. And it was a very fascinating time. But like I said, I was lonely a lot, especially when there was no one else there and I was the only one. And I was 18 at the time, and from the hotel that I was staying at, you could hear across the alley, across the road, loud and almost jovial sounds coming from a bar that was across the street.
Okay.
And I didn't have the gumption to go to the bar except to buy a bottle from them. I went over to the bar and I bought a bottle of alcohol. I think it was Jack Daniels. It was a whiskey. And I took it back to the room and I drank some whiskey. And I never drank in America. And I wasn't even familiar with alcohol in any sense because, I was 18 in Virginia, it's 21. So I didn't really, I might have snuck beers with friends, when I was younger, 16, 17, but never really got into it at all. But this strong liquor, this whiskey, kind of took a hold on me. At first, it was just that bottle. It lasted the rest of the time I was there. There was some sneakiness about it. I didn't want anybody else when they came in to know it was there. Maybe I finished it before they got there and got rid of the bottle. I don't remember. I don't recall all of it, but it did something to me. And when I got back to America, I pursued it. I started trying to figure out how to get alcohol, even though I was underage. I started experimenting with other things, marijuana. I started smoking cigarettes. I did a lot of things that that started me down a different road. And I truly believe that anybody can become addicted to anything if you do it enough. Okay, if you do it, and even if you know it's wrong and you continue to do it, if you do it enough, it will be an addiction and you won't be able to get out of it easily. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, I was doing things that were changing the way that I think. If you know anything about alcoholism or drug abuse, you know that it's insane. You keep doing it over and over, expecting something else to happen, and the same thing happens every time. And the same thing that happens every time is not usually good. It's usually bad. It's usually a destructive thing, or a hurtful thing, or a painful thing, or even really, really negative to you. Like you wake up with the most worst hangover you ever had, you know, and then you do, oh, I'm going to do it again. Or you take the hair of the dog and you try to say it's not going to happen again. I won't do it like that again. And you try to control it. And so you have these two elements of insanity and lack of control. Although you want that control, you don't have it. You don't have it. And, you know, as Christians, we know that's because we don't have control. God has control. But when you're warping your mind with that insanity, you don't think like that. The way you think changes, and you don't think like that. You know, as a man thinks, so as he goes, was one of the proverbs, and that's very, very true, especially to an alcoholic or a drug addict or somebody lost in any addiction, really. When you think about that all the time, that's what's going to take over your thinking. You know what I'm saying? The more you think about it, the more you think about it, you know, and that's the way it goes on and on and on. And so I started down a path. After that, my sophomore, junior, and senior years of college, towards partying. I started skydiving. I found out that.
So let me stop you just for a second. So during those years of college, would you still consider yourself an active Christian, or have you? What's your faith look like at this point? Your behavior is not where it should be.
That's
but
right.
Where would you see your faith at that point?
That's right. I still believed in God. I still had faith. I still consider myself a member of the church.
Okay.
I wasn't a member of a local congregation because there wasn't one for me to attend at college that I was comfortable with, that I thought was right. But what started happening is I started developing two faces. The face that I really was, which was only really going for what I wanted, a selfish, partying fool. And then the face I presented when I went home, or when I went back to the congregation I grew up with, back at home, or in front of those people. So what started happening was this sort of dichotomy where I was two different people, depending on who I was around.
And so you just put on a different hat, right? So it's like, okay, here's the person my family, the church needs me to be. So I'll wear that hat today. And then as soon as you're gone, take it off and put the partying hat on. That's
right. And I would go visit. One time, I think I visited my aunt and uncle when they were living in Colorado. But my parents moved to Colorado soon after that. Or actually, they moved to Australia, and they had a couple years in Australia out in the middle of the outback. And then they moved to Colorado after that. But I remember at some point going to Colorado. My aunt and uncle lived in Colorado. They still do. And the local congregation there, somebody asked me to talk about the China thing, the China experience. Like, how was it? You kind of went on this mission, and how was that? What was that like? Teach our young people what that's like. And I remember giving that talk, but then as soon as I could get away from that, I was trying to get another drink and get, so it was the two sides of the coin. Like, one, look at me, I did, look what I did, and that was part of the problem too, because there's a lot of pride and ego in me at that time. My grandpa, I'm named after my grandpa. His name was Stephen, and he used to say to me that you're too big for your britches. You're too big for your britches. And
it's a very grandpa thing to say.
Yeah, right around this time, but he saw it. He saw, you think about yourself way too much. You think too high of yourself way too much, and you're lying. And this is the real thing, is I'm lying to myself at this point because of that two-faced thing. Mm-hmm. I'm not only being deceived by Satan and alcohol, but I'm deceiving myself. I'm allowing myself to be deceived by myself, saying, "Oh, it's okay. You're not as bad as other people." There's a million things that people out there who want to justify their behavior will say to justify that behavior. And you start lying to yourself in really, really pertinent ways. And I remember, it got worse and worse. And the two-faced thing went away because people started seeing, oh, you're not going to services at all. We haven't, you're talking about something different. Because like I said, I started skydiving at this time. And what I found in skydiving was this sort of antipathy towards death. I'm if this is the way I go. There's sayings in skydiving like blue skies, black death. Like we know there's a chance, highly likely, more likely than anybody than other things that we could die doing this. But you're
more likely to die jumping out of an airplane than staying in it.
Unless the plane's crashing. But yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But we say things like, but you're not. But the people who don't jump out of planes aren't really alive.
Okay.
You're not really pushing the envelope, so you don't really know what really true living is. And it's funny because that parallels to Christianity now, but at the time I didn't see that. I was, like I said, I would jump all day and party all night, and every chance I got, I'd go to school on the weekends. On Friday afternoon, I would finish my last class, and me and some skydiving friends would pack up, and we would go down to the drop zone, and we'd stay there all weekend. And I pursued that, and my alcoholism and my pot smoking. I was a pothead, pretty bad. Just about any drugs. I was a drug addict. Anything that I could get my hands on, I would use. It was that I was that depraved about it. And this went on for a long time, 25 years. 25 years. I went through a whole lifetime of turning my back to God and doing what I thought I needed to do, what I wanted to do, doing what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, right? Not worrying about God's will for me, but only doing what I want to do, my will only, right? It's the opposite of what we're taught to do in Christianity. That's what I did. And it was easy to do because I was sloshed. I was in a different state of mind the whole time. And I remember my grandmother writing me letters saying, please stop wallowing in the pig's mire. Please come. You had such a, I had this trajectory that my grandmother thought I had, that I was going to be like you. But that whole time I was a missionary to China when I was 18. I preached my first sermon when I was 16. There was this kind of trajectory where where it looked like maybe I was going to be a preacher, but I kept making little tiny choices, little steps away from it until it was totally gone. That, the potential of it was gone, and I remember my dad and my mom multiple times trying to talk to me about it and open up a conversation about it, and I would shut them off. I would shut them down. I was unwilling to talk about it. At one point, I got my dad to the point where he basically said, Steve, there's good and there's bad. There's black and there's white, but there's no gray area. You think that you're in some kind of gray area. There's no gray area. You're either in the white, in the light, or you're in the darkness, one or the other. So are you either serving God or you're serving yourself? You're serving Satan. You're serving man. Which is it? Are you serving to the flesh or you're serving to God? And I remember telling him to stop the conversation. I remember saying, well, then I'm on the devil's side. If it's one or the other, then I'm not on your side. I'm not on that side. I'm not on God's side. I'm away from that. So I existed in that frame for, like I said, about 25 years, and life gets worse and worse for an alcoholic. There's a progression to alcoholism and drug addiction where it gets worse and worse. Like I said, it's insanity to begin with, and you have that insanity that you keep expecting something to be different, but it keeps being the same. And you might have moments of elation and some kind of high. If anybody smoked cigarettes out there, the best way I can explain it is the first time you smoke a cigarette, you get that kind of buzz, like goofy feeling in your head, like you feel kind of dizzy. And that dizziness, that dizziness is kind of what you want, what you're chasing after. I truly believe that all people who are drinking and drugging hard, they're really searching for God, but they just don't know how. They're trying to get that feeling of joy and unburdened life that you only get in Christ, but they don't know how to do it. And they keep feeling a touch of it with that drug or with that drink or with some level of drunkenness or something. And you've heard the term chasing the dragon. That's what chasing the dragon is. You're trying to get back to that feeling and maintain that feeling as much as you can in your life. But it's such a fleeting thing. It's total futility. And it's harder and harder to touch every time that you touch it. Every time you get it for a moment, it's gone. And it's harder to get back there the next time.
And the carnage that's left behind in your life is worse every time, right?
Exactly.
Do you almost, when I think of how the scripture says that we as Christians have a peace that surpasses understanding, is that kind of what you feel like you're chasing? You're chasing that good feeling where everything is just, you're okay with life, everything's good, but you're doing it in obviously an incorrect way. That's never going to work that way. Is that a way of describing it at all?
Yes.
Okay.
I truly believe that everybody has a God-shaped hole in their heart.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else that will ever fill it. You try to fill it with other things. The thing is this world is not comfortable. It's painful. This world is not easy. There's suffering. We know this, but the thing is an alcoholic or a drug addict is trying to kill that pain, to get away from that pain, not think about it. It might be physical pain. It might be mental pain. It might be emotional pain. It might be spiritual pain. It could be any one of those things, but you think that, well, I didn't feel it for a minute because I squashed it with this feeling of euphoria that I had for a moment. And I want to get back there because I'm not thinking about it. I was raised and I was born in 1972, and in the 70s and 80s, when I was being raised, we didn't have a thing called ADA or ADHD. We didn't have attention deficit disorder, ADD or ADHD. We didn't have it's not like it today. I truly believe that I am probably one of those. They talk about people being on the spectrum of, I might have even been on the spectrum. Like you tried to compliment me saying that I'm one of the smartest guys. My brain works different. It always has. Like it's always going. It doesn't make me smarter, but it means there's more things going through there and I'm processing more and it never slows down. When you drink and drug, it slows down. You have moments where you're not.
So you're self-medicating. You're self-medicating.
That's it. A lot of it is that. Your brain becomes a suffering thing because you can't slow it down. You haven't figured out another way to slow it down. So you're slowing it down with these drinks and you get moments of, you don't feel alone. You don't feel isolated. You don't feel painful. You don't feel, like your mind just won't shut up, It's a relief thing at the beginning. And that's the thing. That's why it's so enticing. And when you read scriptures about it, there's part of it that you could see that's true. The woes to you in Proverbs and in Isaiah, the woes to the one who goes back to the table or goes back to the drink. And then it talks about how you feel like you're on top of the mast of a ship. This is all true. But you don't know it at the beginning. At the beginning, you're just, what's this? Like I said, I was raised in the church and I knew better. But I still wanted to, what's this about? There's a rebellion. There's a rebelliousness to me that was always there. As soon as I got clear of any kind of authority or what I saw as authority, my folks, whatever, I wanted to test the boundaries, right? And I didn't respect any authority. People ask me, how come you didn't go in the military? You could have been in the military. You could have been skydiver in the Air Force. You could have done a bunch of different things. You were at school. Virginia Tech had cadets. It had the military aspect to Virginia Tech. Why did you do that? And I said, I always had the same answer. I have an aversion to authority. I don't like anybody telling me what to do. I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it, you know? And there's an ego and a pride level there that is detrimental. It's hurtful to a person. You have to humble yourself. You cannot, the return to God story for me, when, 25 years into it, when I was 42, I reached a point, what they call it bottom. You have to hit bottom to recover from alcoholism. My bottom was realizing that I'm doing the same thing over and over, and all I am is hastening my death. When I started skydiving, I didn't care. I thought, only the good die young. Who cares when I die? It doesn't matter. But the further along you go, I met Krista. I married her in the dark times. We had Jameson. We had my son in the dark times, and the whole time I'm squashing this part of me that's in the back of my mind going, what are you doing? Right. And the only way I could shut that part of me up was to get more in me, more drinks, more drugs in me. And then it was quiet again. And
so then where's that point of critical mass where like you said, you hit bottom? What is there a moment there, or was it a culmination of things? How tightly can you pin it to the timeline of your history? You say this is it.
The point for me was when I stopped digging. I realized that I was 5 feet from 6 feet under, that I had 1 foot in the grave, that it was coming sooner than I thought. What happened was I don't know how to explain it, because I don't know exactly if it was a stroke or mini stroke, or if it was some kind of something else. But I would be drinking and smoking weed all day, and I would take a hit off of something of the weed, and I would get to the point where I had no control over my body. I would be stroking out, and all I could tell myself in my mind, only thing that happened in my mind was, breathe. You have to breathe or you're going to die. And I would start breathing, and I would come back from it. I saw on my wife's face, I saw on my brother's face. My brother was living with us at the time. I saw on other people around me when this happened, that they're like, what's going on? There's something going on. But I would come back, and then I would say, oh, it's fine. Right. And I would ignore it. Right? But it started happening more and more and more. And during one of these times, when I saw the look on my wife's face, where she was asking me, do I need to call 911? I'm killing myself. I'm killing myself. And do I want to die already? Or do I want to try to live as long as possible? It's your choice, I had quit smoking about 1.5 years before I quit drinking. And I want to tell anybody who has any kind of addiction, keep trying to quit. No matter what, if you want to quit, keep trying. Even if you fail, and you will, just keep going. They even say that. They say the more times you try to quit smoking, the closer you are to actually succeeding at quitting smoking. You have to try and try and try again. It's a Bible principle that we forget out here in the world, that if a man falls, he needs to get up again every time. You have to get up every time and try again, try again, try again. The wonderful thing is, I've been sober for 6.5 years, going on 6.5 years, six years and 3 months. And I've never had one of those mini strokes since I stopped. Wow. Since I stopped using drugs and alcohol, I've never once had one of those little things. I've never, ever seen fear in my wife's eye that I might be dying at this moment. All of that went away, right? And the thing is the last couple of years of it, I was telling myself I needed these things because of my back pain and there's reasons why I need it. I need these things. It's not a want anymore. I need to get back to feeling okay.
The rationalization is insane, isn't it? I mean, our ability to tell ourselves why we need to do the wrong thing. I'm just constantly amazed my ability to manipulate myself.
That's it.
Whenever it comes time to make those sorts of things. Yeah, it's all deception, self-deception. Yeah.
Yep, self-deception. And eventually you can't deceive yourself anymore. That's not true. You don't need it. I don't need that. The truth of the matter is the back pain was being exacerbated because I kept using drugs and alcohol. the pain itself was being caught is a self. It's a spiral that's feeding itself. You know, of course you think you need to get back because it's further away you're further below okay, and you're trying to get back to okay, but every time you use it, you're getting further down away from okay. You're just killing yourself. It's just the most destructive thing that there possibly can be. And so I was the moment that got me was that one time Krista was looking through our financials. I usually took care of financials before, and she was looking through our financials. She couldn't figure out why I was taking all this money off of one of the credit cards, like $60, $100 almost every day, because by this point I was buying prescription drugs and breaking them up and snorting them, and it's very expensive. Oxycodone and all these street drugs. When a pharmaceutical drug goes on the street, it gets very expensive. So I was spending all this money, and she's like, "Well, where's all this money going?" And I at that point I'm like, "That's it. I gotta fess up." And I admitted to her. I said, "Honey, I'm a drug addict. I've been spending thousands of dollars a week on drugs, and we were in poverty because." Everything that we made, that she made it with her job, and what I made, I would use it, and we were broke, and not just financially, we were broken spiritually, the whole thing. We were bankrupt spiritually, bankrupt emotionally, bankrupt physically, bankrupt financially, emotionally bankrupt. And so I didn't fight anymore. And at first it was, you're seeking a solution, and you're grasping at straws. You don't know what to do. Like how do I not go? I can't even. I remember close to the end, Krista went out of town. She took Jameson to Disneyland, and with her sister, and I was here alone. And I said, I'm going to try not to use for a day. I'm trying not to do anything for a day. I couldn't even go an hour. I need, and when you're addicted to opiates, it's like all driving. It's the only thing that's in your mind. And that's why I couldn't go more than an hour. Now, when I confessed to her and my brother, we all three started thinking about how we're going to do it. And we came up with a plan. The plan was to keep me away from money, from the car. They took my wallet, they took my keys, and one of them's always going to be in my with me, kind of babysitting me.
Can I ask you that conversation, right? Where you move from you may be telling yourself, I'm trying to manage it, but you're doing it all on your own, and you're really just rationalizing and self-deceiving, and you're to where you talk to somebody else. Could you talk about that for a second, just
Yes.
in terms of how, I mean, that's a hard thing.
Yes, and it's worse than that. At that time, I'm just trying to tell them as much as I want them to know that I could still continue doing what I was doing to a degree. There's
Okay.
a part of me who's like, yeah, I know I'm spending too much on opiates, and I know, but I don't want to give up marijuana. I don't want to give up alcohol. I just have a problem with pills, so I'm going to do what I can to placate them enough to go back to some level of what I want, right? So it's not even to a point yet where I'm not recovering yet. It's going to take a long time for me to detox before I get to that point. My mind is still very, very dark and clouded, and I'm still an addict. I'm always going to be an addict for the rest of my life. I'm always going to be an alcoholic for the rest of my life. But now I am a recovered alcoholic, and the choice is on that first use. Like I could choose to not use the first drink or not use the first drug, and that's where my choice is. But I know that if I did take that first drink or that first drug, my choice is gone. I'm right back to where I was in addiction. But at that point, I was just kind of, okay, we're just doing what we can to placate. For 2 weeks, my brother works at the Toll River. He does water treatment for the whole city of Seattle. And it's isolated. It's up there. It's away from everything. And he took me up there. And at the first, I'm just getting off of the pills, the opioids. I brought weed with me, and I brought alcohol. We drank together up there, but I was trying to get off the pills. Now, the first 2 weeks, it was just me getting off the pills. And let me tell you, that you have to go through it when you're on it, but it's frightening. And the pain and the misery that I went through those 2 weeks, it stays with me. And it's like Ecclesiastes, where it tells us to remember the dark days. For an addict, yes, you have to remember those dark days, because I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to go through that again, and I might not be able to go through it again, even if I went, I made that decision to go back out. But once I got clear of the pills, 2 weeks of that, being isolated, I was clear of the pills. Then I'm like, well, what's going on? Am I going to keep going with the alcohol? And what I did is someone said, well, try an NA meeting, a Narcotics Anonymous. Try them. Maybe you can just do it about the pills. Okay. Well, I went to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and the only thing I heard at that meeting, the only thing I remember, is that they said that if you're still using weed and you're still drinking, then you aren't recovered at all. You're still toxic. You're still in it.
So they called you out on it just immediately, not necessarily you specific, but
That's
just,
right.
yeah.
Right. Just the general talk. I don't think anybody even, I left early, and I don't think anybody even knew my name. They just were talking about their story, and they were talking how when I got off of this, I knew I was still in trouble because I still was drinking every day or something like that. And I'm like, what? And that part was really hard for me to understand. And then if you remember, about 6 years and a couple months ago was the last time that I think it was the only time that the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. We were in the Super Bowl. And that was my last debauch. If you talk to anybody about their drinking and drugging career, there's always a last debauch. That was mine. Mine is that Super Bowl Sunday, and Krista had bought me a crate that would age whiskey. You put the whiskey in it, and it would age. It barrel aged the whiskey, right? You're supposed to let it sit for 6 months, a year to age the whiskey. It never aged. The alcohol I put in it would only last a day or two before I was draining it out. So that was another sign to me that most people who are normal drinkers could let that go for a year, 2 years, 5 years, and they'd have aged, barrel aged whiskey. Not me. I'm bad, So I looked around more for AA meetings this time. I said, well, NA saying I need to lose everything. So let me see what other meetings, NA, AA, what's out there. And I went to one that was, I had confusion about AA. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was people probably going to a meeting to keep drinking, and they just were, commiserating with each other or something, or, trying to stay, I had no idea about it. I never been to it. But I found an AA meeting. I went to it, and I heard something. And then I went the next day. It was snowed the next day on Super Bowl Sunday, or the next week it snowed. And I went to a meeting the next week, and I heard something. I felt something. AA talks about there's steps to AAs, and the funny thing is people they say it's open to any religious belief, but almost every one of the steps has God in it. There's God is a part of it, and I felt the love of God through the people at AA. That's what I felt. I felt love. I felt love. That they wanted me to stay sober, and they were willing to help me stay sober. They had love for their neighbors to that degree. And even though some of them aren't Christians and some of them don't even believe in God, they had that love. And that's what started me back, was the love of my neighbors and their love for me. And it took me, like I said, I was toxic for a long time. My mind was still for 20, you don't walk 25 years into the forest and expect to be back out of the forest in a year.
Right.
I'm still walking out of that forest. I detoured from the path of God onto the Broadway, as it were, and I still have to backtrack to get back to the way. And so the first part of my sobriety was one day at a time, and it still is to a degree. I, I just went to a lot of meetings and didn't drink in between. I went to a lot of meetings and then didn't use drugs in between. And I met a lot of people, and the thing that was consistent, the most consistent thing is there, well, first of all, we live in an area where there's a lot of AA meetings, so there's consistency in the meeting itself, but there was consistency in the people had concern for everybody. They want everybody who wants to stop drinking to stop drinking. Mm-hmm. If you think, if you're in an AA meeting, you're probably there for a reason, because people don't just show up there when their lives are going so well and everything's perfect. But they all wanted me to succeed in that endeavor, and that to me was huge. Now, like I said, there's a lot of steps in AA, the 12 steps, that are God related. The first step even, it says that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. And then the second step is you came to believe in a power greater than yourself, came to believe in God, and you believe that only He can restore you to sanity. Remember, I was talking about how it was insane behavior. AA itself teaches that God is the one who brings us back from the brink of insanity. He's the one who gives us sanity again. And the third step is to made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood it. Which that's really what you're doing when you're a Christian. When you decide to be a Christian. And then the rest of the steps, there's 4 through 9 are kind of cleaning up the wreckage of your past. Like you were talking about how I made a lot of bad decisions that hurt not just me, but people around me. The 4th through the 9th step is kind of cleaning up the wreckage of your past. And then the 10, 11, and 12 steps are kind of what they call maintenance steps, where you're continuing to live in this way where you're relying on God. And those, and even 10, 11, 12 is, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. So there, the thing that I learned in AA is that I needed to get back to God. I stepped away. He was always there, but I turned my back on Him, right? And I remember early on, someone slipped me a note and said that, God isn't lost, you are. Someone slipped me a note like that in AA. They said, you keep saying that you lost God. God isn't lost, you are. He's there, He's right there, And that, these things melted the intellectual self-deception things that I had been going on in my life for so long. And I went, wow. And once my eyes were open, once the scales fell off about this stuff, and I started recovering and not drinking and drugging every day, then the rationalizations and all stuff also went out the window. And I'm like, well, what do I have to do? What the cool thing about what AA taught me versus what I learned when I was a young, raised in the church, is we put a big focus on baptism to be saved. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do to be saved, and confession and prayer are the two things that always come back to me now that weren't really instilled in me that to that large degree when I was younger, but they're huge part of me, my Christian walk today. I have to admit when I'm doing something wrong. I have to confess to one another when I've messed up. Even for accountability's sake, and for to be able to forgive myself. I can't forgive myself until I admit that I do it. You don't get anywhere. Like I was saying, the first step in AA is admitting that you're powerless over alcohol. By admitting I'm powerless over alcohol, I'm saying that I'm powerless. Well, that's my dilemma. My lack of power is my dilemma. Who has the power? God. You can't start going back to God until you admit that there's a problem. You can't get away from anything.
Well, one of the things
you admit that it's a problem.
Yeah, one of the things that I think has made AA probably one of the more successful, if not the most successful in America, system for helping people out of alcoholism is they found a system that works. And then you go, oh, well, if you look at the principles, those are Bible principles, because God's ways works. And so there's an attempt, I think, to secularize it, but you can only go so far with that. So first step is detox, get yourself living a life where your brain can function well again. Then in that process, when when does the change come to saying I need to be right with God? Is it that kind of simultaneous with the two? You start going back to services, you start
Yes, they
making
parallel.
some changes. Okay.
Yes, very, very much so. They parallel greatly. When you're working those steps, especially those ones that, like I was talking about, clearing up the wreckage of your past, you're facing things that you've done when you were alcohol, and you can't blame them on alcohol. I can't blame them on, there were times in the dark times of my life where I was cursing God. There was times when I was saying to other people out loud, there were times when I was the one who was not professing Jesus. I was doing the opposite. I was telling people that it's I got so far close to atheism. I was agnostic for a big part of that, but I was so close to atheism that I was kind of doing the arguments to atheism to people. I was telling them reasons why God didn't exist, reasons why I left the church. How could God punish that guy for trying to save his ark from falling? Well, he just struck him dead. How could he do that? This is the thing. This is where it switches. When my mind started working right, I discovered that just because I don't understand something in the Bible doesn't mean that it's wrong. If there's a problem with my understanding in the Bible, it's my problem, not God's problem. And it's not the author's fault that I don't get it. It's my fault that I don't get it. And if I don't understand something, and nobody's been able to answer to my, what I expect them to answer it to appease my sense of importance, then who cares? I don't want to. I don't, but that's what changed. Like I said, it's all wrapped up in the ego, in pride, the bad kind of pride. I thought that I was too big for my britches. I thought I knew all the answers. I am a know-it-all. I still am today. I have to fight it all the time. I'm a know-it-all. I know better than you what's best for you. Not only know what's best for me, but I know what's better for anybody else. And I have to fight that. That's not true. That's also a self-deception. That is not true. I don't know. The thing that Alcoholics Anonymous taught me is the more I know, the less I actually know. The more I learn that I need to know a lot more. There's way more out there than I will ever know.
One of the things that it hits me is you're describing a journey away from pride. Like pride was there's all these other things, right? Your story is yours, and the way that it manifests itself is different for each of us. But ultimately, that journey is dealing with your own pride. I have a way to do things, and then we realize that doesn't work. And even if if somebody's listening, they may or may not be able to identify with your specific journey of substance abuse. Some of them will, and I hope they're listening, and I hope they're saying, maybe the wheels are turning, that there's a way out. But even if that's not their specific issue, I think we can all identify with the journey of pride. It's like, oh, well, maybe it manifests itself differently with me, but it's the same problem. It's the human, we're going to do it our way. And so you begin to recover from alcoholism. You start attending. Let me speak because we attend together. Steve is a faithful, committed member. His family is a wonderful family. They're great people. And if you met Steve and didn't know this story, you wouldn't know. So if you are looking at a loved one or something like that, and you go, I don't know how they'll ever get out of this, know that there's hope, first of all. I mean, Steve, you and your family are a total example of that. But Steve, what would you say? I mean, what would you want people to know? People who, one, have loved ones who were raised, became Christians and then fell away. What would you want them to know? And then if perchance maybe this gets into the hands of somebody who is in the middle of that 25-year darkness that you were, what would you want them to know?
Okay. Yeah. So applications to all Christians, talking not just to somebody a loved one, but anybody who's not saved. If somebody who's been saved and they've fallen away, but or anybody who's the number one application for every Christian is pray. I knew when I was out there in the darkness, I knew that there was family members who were praying for me on a regular basis. You know, when it was important to me, when I started coming back, it touched me to a point where I would cry over it. I would break down over it. These people were doing everything they could to get me back. And the number one thing they could do was pray, talk to God about it, say, please show me ways that I can reach them, help them, watch over them, give us opportunities to speak with them and to talk to them about this, and let me take those opportunities, you know, and make the most of them. But the fact of that's the number one thing you can do for anybody who's lost. Pray for them, pray specifics about them. You know, that's huge. That's huge. Hope. It's never too late. God forgive. What did Jesus say? He said, forgive 77 times 70, right? Okay. If Jesus said that, he believes that. He thinks that not only that we should forgive, but he will forgive. Of course, there's a confession and the repentance part of it. You have to want to come back to him. You have to come back to him, but he's going to forgive you if you do. So there's always hope, no matter how far down someone has gone, no matter how far away they've gone away from God, to the point of cursing him and the opposite of professing him, you know, denying him. There's still hope. Think of all the characters in the Bible who had those moments where they, you know, Peter denied Christ. He came back, he's restored, right? Think Solomon was one of the wisest. God granted him the wisdom of the ages, gave him the most wisdom of all. We know that he had problems with his wives and with idolatry later in life. After all that, you know, how can somebody who's the wisest person in the world be so foolish, right? But he was. Now, you know, I try to be optimistic about Solomon and say, you know, Ecclesiastes might have been written after that, and that's the way I want to look at it. I want to see Solomon in heaven, you know, and talk to him about it, you know. But you know, there's when you think about all the characters in the Bible, the only one that I even Judas Iscariot, at any moment, and you know he was repentant because he didn't want the money. He tried to get the silver back to the Sanhedrin. He didn't want the money. So there was a part of him that was repentant, right? And he's the only one that I can think of that I don't know 100%, you know, where any of them are going to fall. I'm not the judge. God's the judge. The relationship is between me and God and you and God. And I can't say who's good and who's not. But I do see examples throughout the Bible of people stepping away, turning their back on God, and then coming back. So you can come back too. You can come back too. Like I said, don't stop trying. If there's something in you that says I need to quit, that's good. Feed that. And don't stop trying. I only went a day this time. A day's a miracle, if you think about it. And not drinking for a full 24 hours. When I first stopped with the pills, like I said, I couldn't even go an hour. So 24 hours was mind-blowing. Like this is way more than I can even possibly imagine. You know? Right. And then what you'll find is that at some point it's gonna stick. You know, I don't give up on anybody. I meet people all the time in AA rooms and meetings, and they're bad. There's people who are way far gone, but I don't give up on them. I've had friends that I got sober with, and then they went back out. So you know, I still see it. You know, parts of my journey and other people, they can come back anytime they want. It's still that's the cool thing about our God. He gave us free will to this degree that even if we decided to walk away from him, at some point we decide to come back, he's going to take us back every time. So it's never too late. There's always hope, you know, and let that hope give you the other blessings from God. I get joy from that hope. I get kindness from that hope. I get compassion. There's other things that come out of that I've learned because of the dark days of my life. They've taught me to be better. That's really what I'm trying to say. Spirituality is a progress. It's not a perfect. I'm never going to get it right, but I can get better and better every day. And the main thing to remember is, like I said, love God, love your neighbors. Even Jesus said that. That's the top two. Everything else hangs on that. If you can do that, then you're moving in the right direction, right? So remember that. Remember, even the unlovely people, even the people that I want to give up on, I have to fight and love them anyway.
If there's time, there's hope. If there's time, there's hope.
That's right.
Well, Steve, I know one of the reasons we changed the time on this is because Steve is an essential worker. He's got to get off to work. And Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to this, because this is not, it's not an easy thing to talk about. But it's the type of thing that everybody, I think, needs to hear. And there's a lot of benefits in realizing that somebody can be raised with the truth, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to have a journey of their own. But keep praying for them, and just look for those opportunities we have to reach out to people, and know that it's a process. It's a process. It doesn't, the road back was not overnight. It's not a light switch. So just for everybody to know, next week we'll be back at 3:00 on Thursdays, and we'll be meeting with Bill Spawn. He's one of the elders down in Sumner, Washington. Another great, fun individual I look forward to sharing with you. And thank you again, Steve. Say hi to your family, and we'll close.